You are listening to Movies to Watch Before You Die, episode number 6. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Movies to Watch Before You Die, a weekly podcast that breaks down the most important movies ever made that will change the way you think, the way you feel, and hopefully the way you live your life. I'm your host, Mark Yazica, and with me today is my favorite, best, most excellent friend, Dan Helbling.
Yeah, man. Hello.
Which one? Any of those?
I like all of them. If we
all
can
of
just
them?
Every time, just that over
Just
and over.
Those over and over
Yep.
again. Don't even need to pick one adjective. Just use all of them. Okay. Dan, what movie are we talking about today?
V for Vendetta.
That's right, V for Vendetta. 2006 film starring Natalie Portman and directed by James McTeague. He was the first AD on the Matrix films. So he
See where he met.
He knows the Wachowski siblings.
And we see where he met V.
Yes, because Hugo Weaving was in the Matrix.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you haven't seen the film yet, please take the time to give it a watch before listening to the podcast, because Dan and I are pretty much going to ruin it for you right now.
We spoil the crap out of it.
So you can check out the links in the description down below to see where you can rent or buy it. Or, as I always say, just go to your library and borrow it for free. Because you can do that.
Definitely there.
Because you pay taxes and your government provides that for you.
Did you used to get movies a lot from the library?
I did.
Same. All the time.
I was like, why is no one here? There's a bunch of... You can just borrow this shit for free.
Yeah.
And no one's here renting these movies.
Yeah.
They don't always have the best movies.
And ideally now you'll go there and the movie won't be there because so many people are actually going to go there maybe.
Like, damn it, someone else heard the podcast. Yeah. Well, I hope that's a problem I cause.
Yes.
Okay, well, hopping into the movie, Dan, we just watched the film. What are some of your general thoughts, general feelings, first impression?
It's a very exaggerated film, which is a good thing, of course, because it explains and it goes over and conveys many difficult ideas and issues with current governments, and it talks a lot about the responsibility of the people and the role that people play in government.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's also amazing. The film's 10 years old, and they played up the fact that it takes place in the future, sometime in the 2020s, I guess. For some aspects are a little dated in terms of the way the technology is used that you and I laughed at while watching the film. But besides that, it's amazing how many parallels we can even draw to things that are happening politically today, which is kind of scary. So let's hop into that theme first then. There's this idea of totalitarianism that's very prevalent in the film. You can't really miss this theme. So we take place in this sort of dystopian future. We have this fascist one-party government, and there's lots of connections to modern issues today, especially with Trump's current ascension to power in our own country, and lots of similar themes of homophobia and xenophobia and censorship and a government-controlled media, all of these sorts of things. But ultimately, in this fascist government, these people, the people themselves, the collective people, they have no power, they have no voice. They're really just at the whim of the government, which sort of begs the question then, generally, what is the role of government? What's the ideal relationship between a government and its people?
I think that we are going to have biased answers because of what we've been taught a government is and the ideal government that has been shoved down our throats.
Okay. I think that's okay.
I just wanted to state that because I think that's important.
There's not a right answer either. This is like the philosophy of law and order and governance.
Yes. So what I'm trying to say is the way that I see government, my personal opinion of what a government should be is separate from the people. Separate from the people meaning the people don't have to be included in that, but you can be included in it, and you always have a say, but you're not forced to do anything. But you can't be punished you can't be punished by not doing something. You shouldn't be favored more for doing something. And I think that the government should be there to facilitate day-to-day life. I think that's it, and protect the people that it's governing.
I mean, yeah, even generally facilitating day-to-day life, I think that covers a pretty broad spectrum of things. And if a government can't facilitate things that go on in your daily life, then what purpose is it really serving at that point, But yeah, I mean, generally, a government should serve the people, and most importantly, not the other way around. We sort of see in this film that the people are completely separated from the government. And the government is its own entity that has goals that don't even align with the people's best interests or the people's interests at all, really, for that matter. But I think as an institution, a government should uphold the ideals of the people. If the people don't see a value in the government, then what good is it providing? What is it doing for the people at that point? And I guess nothing. But this film, we have a totalitarian regime, a totalitarian government that's in charge of all these people. What factors do you think cause these sorts of governments to take hold? Or what are things that people can do to take a leaf or a note from this book to stop the ascension of people like Chancellor Sutler from coming to power?
Educating themselves. I think that the primary reason that educating themselves is even a wrong way to say it, I think, because somebody who just sees something and immediately blathers on about it to, like, let's just use Facebook as an example. Like, you watch a video and then you immediately share it. You need to fact check. You need to make sure that's right. Not just by, like, one person says it, so you're like, oh, that's true. And not by one person says it and then Googling it and then finding the written form of the video. Like, that's also not true. You need to educate yourself. You need to form your own unique opinion on something, because there's not just two opinions. That's how the two-party system came to be, because there's the only two opinions that people actually started to look at. And I think it just all comes down to, you need to be able to form an educated, unique, and individual opinion upon anything, honestly.
That's a valid argument. Yeah, I think for me, I think I viewed fear as the primary cause of what allows people like Hitler or Sutler or even Trump to come to power. Mm-hmm. I think governments or people who aspire to be in government sort of prey on people who are afraid, and they sort of console them that with their complete control as a candidate or as a chancellor or dictator or whoever, that they can solve these people's problems and they can make their fears go away. And so if we look at fear as like a product of something, if fear is something that the government creates, then in that sense they will perpetually have obedient citizens. And I think Trump played on a lot of fears of people. He sort of tapped into what a lot of middle America was afraid of, and I think the biggest thing was change. And people who were nostalgic for a different time were afraid that they were going to lose the America that they knew and that they loved.
Can I comment on this?
I would love for you to comment on this.
Which is interesting, because Obama's entire platform was change. It was taking whatever Bush did in the last 8 years of his term and not necessarily reverting everything that he did, but changing the things that he saw prominent and that needed changed. Sure. And if Trump is coming in and saying, well, we need to just not do any of this, we need to revert back, like, you're changing. You're making changes. So it's interesting to hear that the majority of the people want to change or don't want change, so they want somebody to change what somebody changed. It's just moronic.
It is. I guess, to be more specific, it's not change. It's change from what's happening now to the way things were. We're just changing back. One more change. One last change.
We're backpedaling.
Yeah. Snip snap. like a
snip, snap,
triple
snip,
reverse vasectomy.
Triple reverse vasectomy.
Or whatever
you know how
Michael
much
Scott
that
had.
takes on a man?
I don't. But at one point in the film, the quote is given, "People should not be afraid of their governments. Government should be afraid of the people."
Yes.
Is that right? Do you think he was right in saying that?
I agree with that statement.
Why?
Because people run the government.
Not in every circumstance.
Let's talk about a vote, I guess. In most cases, the majority of the votes is what is done, is what is put into effect, correct?
In democratic societies,
the government should be afraid of the people because the people are the majority.
So it's a numbers game.
When you think about it, though, government is just an idea as well. Everybody has to believe in a government for a government to work.
That's true. So your argument is then, because the people, the common people, make up a greater proportion of the entire population of a society, it's more likely that they would collectively have ideas that would align better with a sense of morality or ethics that a few people in government may not hold.
That's a good way to put it, yes. Because if government is an idea, and then the people have a different idea, the majority of the people, who has the bigger idea? Obviously, the people are going to have a larger idea, and therefore they can do more with it, such as overthrow government. And especially coming from a character like V, the one who is faceless and is just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
He's the perfect person to say that line because he is the idea these people are going to have that are going to make the government afraid.
Right. I definitely agree with the first half. People should not be afraid of their government. If people are afraid of their government, then the government's not doing its job. But I don't know if government should be afraid of people because governments are ideas.
I think the way that you're looking at the word afraid is
to be fearful of.
I think there's different definitions of afraid.
Like what?
So let's talk religion.
Okay.
There's I know somewhere in the Bible, I don't know where, there's some line that says that you're supposed to fear God. And it's not because you're afraid of God, it's just you know his power. You know what he's capable of. So it's just being mindful of. Does that make sense?
Then they should have said be mindful of God.
I don't disagree with you.
I think it might have been a bad example to use because fear is generally regarded negatively. You don't fear something you're in awe of. But in that sense, government shouldn't be in awe of people.
I think the government needs to understand the power that people have.
I agree with that.
And power doesn't always have to be a negative thing.
It doesn't. But fear is a very specific word. And I think the film utilizes the idea of fear many different ways. And I think V's choice of the word fear was deliberate. And I think when he said fear, he meant fear. He
said afraid. And I just don't see the way that
afraid,
I don't agree with the way that he said it.
Afraid means to be fearful of. But, I mean, let's also take a step back and realize that when he's saying governments, he's speaking from a place of experience in that England, the English government, is his government. So, obviously a lot of his philosophy of government and law comes from this totalitarian regime. In that sense, maybe Sutler's government should be afraid of the people. Or more importantly, Sutler should be afraid of the people. If Sutler is the person who represents the idea of a totalitarian government.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about another major theme of the film, which is rebellion. When the people of any nation, I guess, are unhappy with their government, or the government is no longer doing its job, it's believed that it's the people's duty to replace it, fix it, change it, right? This is usually done through some form of rebellion against the government, because I don't know of many governments that, when told they're not doing their jobs effectively, that they just, like Canadians, go, oh, okay. But one question I think the film poses is if we can accept that rebellion is necessary in the face of governments not only ineffectively doing their jobs, but downright disenfranchising the people of that nation, such as the way the people were treated in this film. At what point do the people intervene? Or how do you know when the time has come to rebel?
I think that the movie showed us the near end of what a government's regime. I think that it showed one of the absolute worst governments that there could be.
It's a pretty bad example.
Enforcing curfews.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's completely taking away people's rights. You're not letting people leave their houses. Like, that's like you're being imprisoned for no reason in your home. So I think that the movie showed us exactly one of the worst case scenarios of a government, which is pretty much at the tipping point or almost pushing people over the edge as to when you would rebel. When you have to say enough is enough. I don't have any, I'm not being treated like a human anymore. I'm being treated like an animal.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. One thing that's really interesting for me, I think this exact notion is something the film actually delves into quite a bit, and it's pretty interesting how we sort of have this dichotomy between the individual and their ideals and what they uphold and these sort of ideas themselves as abstract elements. Because obviously rebellions only work if the majority of the people are involved, right? Mm-hmm. You can have 5 people storm the White House or, the symbol of any government that's oppressing its people. Not that America is right now. I'm not saying that. But, and these 5 people could have perfect ideals, right? They could have the best ideals. That's irrelevant if they don't have the manpower to
harbor a rebellion.
Right. Then their ideals are meaningless.
Yeah.
So the people have to believe in the idea and see their ideal government that they would propose to replace the one they're getting rid of as bigger or larger than any individual. And in the beginning of the film where we see Guy Fawkes get captured and eventually hanged, we hear Evie's voice start with an opening monologue, and she says, "We're told to remember the idea, not the man, because a man can fail. He can be caught, he can be killed and forgotten, But 400 years later, an idea can still change the world. But you cannot kiss an idea, cannot touch it or hold it. Ideas do not bleed, they do not feel pain, they do not love. It is not an idea that I miss, it is a man. And so here, we're sort of introduced to this dichotomy between upholding these ideals of morality and justice and the creation of a government that actually serves its people and does the right thing versus the idea that a rebellion is a collective group of individuals.
A body.
Correct. So is your death as an individual worth the idea you were trying to uphold?
If it starts something. In V for Vendetta, the government was the biggest problem. It was just the government.
Right. And,
So
and America is not a perfect example because
Correct.
we're not living within a totalitarian regime.
Correct.
But
like, let's say North Korea. Let's say
Yeah.
somebody stood up in front of, if somebody like stood up in front of a tank and then like another person like came with them and then that like started, that was just like a domino effect. That would actually mean something. Like that person died. I think the person dying and let's say the media wasn't as controlled as it was in North Korea, that could start something. Which is the same for America. Like you could always start something. It's just will other people get behind you on that?
I agree. The problem is you don't know the outcome of an action you make before you make the action.
It starts with one though.
It does, but
you only hit one domino for the rest of them to fall.
I agree, but when you're there in the moment and you're witnessing the action happening that you disagree with, you have to roll the dice and decide, is my potential death intervening in this situation worth it?
I think that in that situation, I don't think that the person who's intervening is going to even think about that. It's going to be, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do.
So it's automatic.
Yeah, I think that if you're thinking about it,
if the cause is worth it, it's an automatic response.
Yeah, you won't even consider the fact that you could die. Like if I saw somebody being brutally injured or beaten or something like that for a reason that I knew was not that person's fault, I would like to think that I would step in. And since I have not been proposed with that situation, I can't say that I will.
Right.
I want to, though. I would love to
That's good.
be that person.
That's valiant. I think a lot of people are a lot more self-centered than that. Or also on the other side of that, a lot of people speak in ideals, or they speak as if they're some bastion of moral behavior or courage.
Yeah.
And when the situation would present itself, because it's easy to say what you would do or could do, sitting in the safety of your own home, but when you're in the actual circumstance,
did you hear this?
It's a little different.
Did you hear our podcast when we talked about this?
No.
We had a whole topic about could you step in for somebody? Like if you knew somebody was going to die, would you step in for them? And my entire argument was, I cannot tell you yes or no. I've never been put in that situation. It's not something you can.
I agree.
Just say.
I agree.
And I was talking to two people that said they would absolutely do it. They were like, if somebody had a gun to your mother's head, like, would you step in front of that gun? And they were just like, yes. And I was like, I can't say yes or no. Like, I would want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I want to do that, but I've never been around a live gun.
Yeah.
Let alone with my mother on the other end of it. And I love my mother, and I want to do anything I could to save her.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been in that situation. And I think that if you don't look at it that way, then you're just living in a fantasy land.
I agree. I think there's a lot more power in accepting your ignorance than declaring your knowledge of something when you don't actually possess it. Because you don't know.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like a shitty person, but like...
No, there's
I don't want to...
It's called being a realist.
Yeah.
And people don't always like that. But no, I admire you for it, and I agree with you. I think... Yeah, I mean, one of the inherent problems with rebellion is that losses need to be made. You can't fight a war without losing people, right? If you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, as the expression goes, which is kind of a silly expression because omelets are made of eggs. Like
you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
I mean, you have to break the number of eggs that you want to put in your omelet.
Yeah.
It's not a good analogy for like war or like for...
Yeah, to win a war, you have to have people die. Well, you could...
Not if you do a really good fucking job.
Yeah, if you're awesome.
You can make the best fucking omelet. Like
there has to be a goddamn egg in there.
But like if you want a 4-egg omelet, you have to break 4 eggs. Like
yes.
I don't care how good of a chef you are. Maybe if you're a wizard.
Yeah.
Okay, then the term doesn't apply. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure.
So if you want to make an omelet, if you want to start a rebellion, some people are going to have to die. But speaking in terms of the individual sacrificing him or herself for the idea, is rebellion worth it when you think of it in terms of losing your mother or losing your father or brother or lover? Because at the end of the day, you're fighting as a group for an idea, but at the end of the day, you're the individual. You're dying alone, right? Your family's going to miss you,
which can be selfish,
right? So is that a factor? Does that enter into it?
Not if you're fighting for an idea, because then you're not like if you're fighting for the idea, then the person is less valuable. The idea you're fighting for is for the majority of the people, not for yourself.
So it's the greater good.
Yeah. So if you're willing to put your body on the line for an idea, what does it matter then? Because if you don't attain what you want to attain with getting the idea, then what's the point of living?
I agree.
Especially in like a drastic scenario such as a totalitarian dictatorship.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, well, if I die, then my family will miss me. Okay, but like if you don't fight for this, then you're all just gonna live a shitty life. Like what does it matter?
I think it comes down to the fact that some people would rather live a shitty life and be alive than face the thought of losing a loved one or them dying themselves.
That doesn't make sense.
And I'm not one of those people, but I think I can at least see where the argument would come from. But a great example of this in the film is Evie and her parents. Mm-hmm. Because at one point, Evie tells V that her mother wanted to leave England when it started getting bad, but they stayed. They ended up staying, I guess, because her father wanted her to. They stayed. They rebelled against the government after the death of their son, and ultimately they ended up getting killed, and Evie became an orphan. But should they have left? They could have went somewhere and still been a moderately happy family with just one less child. Or is it right that they stayed and rebelled because they were upholding an idea?
Yeah,
they were fighting for that.
I think that was right.
Them staying was the right thing?
I can agree with that.
Regardless of the effects it could have had on Evie?
Correct. She ultimately played a pretty big role in the downfall of the government.
She did.
So if they wouldn't have stayed, that wouldn't have happened.
They would have had to have.
But that's also for the sake of the plot. But
yes. I mean, yeah, it is a plot device. I
think the more people that fight for something, the better odds you're going to have.
I agree, and I'm also a utilitarian in this sense, in that in these circumstances you need to come together to fight for the greater good. But again, it's one of those situations where it's just sort of makes you think that under what circumstances would you put yourself ahead of the idea, and when is it okay to be selfish in those terms? Because at the same time, Evie's parents chose a life of political activism. Not even just the idea of leaving England, but vocalizing their dissent against the government when they knew well the dangers the government posed to people who did those sorts of things, and that they had a young daughter who relied on them. So is that selfish?
I think that it's poor parenting, but I think that they're still fighting for the greater good.
You got to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that. I mean, I feel shitty saying it, but if you're looking at the greater good of all the good that will now come to the people of England because of the way in which the government was toppled, you can't cherry pick examples of families that may or may not have been content with staying together because they didn't end up fighting for anything.
And you can also look at it from a different lens, which is, let's say I was chosen to go to war. Mm-hmm. So the United States government drafted me, and I was sent to war, and I died. Mm-hmm. It's in a similar way. It's an identical situation. I was sent away to protect the people that I cared about.
Right.
And I died. And like I'm protecting not the idea. It's sort of the idea, because in our case, it's the idea of freedom. It's the idea of a democratic society, and me going and fighting in, let's say, Iraq or wherever I'm sent. Like I see a lot of parallels in that.
There are.
It's just one is for the government and one's against the government.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's interesting to look at it that way, because if I go away in the military and I die and I leave, let's say I have a daughter as well, is that bad? I was protecting the country.
I mean, it's not good that you died, but again, you have to look at it more broadly than that.
Yeah. I died in the line of duty.
It's just what it is.
Yeah.
It's the nature of reality. It's a necessary evil.
I didn't even think of it that way. Like I didn't even think of that until like you just started talking about like maybe one parent dying, or
I mean, and it's scary to think about though, because in terms of what happened in the film, Evie's parents and what happened with them is just one example. I'm sure many other families were torn apart and people were hurt by the actions of the government. But again, for the rebellion to work, for the people to actually utilize the power that they have, it has to be an all or nothing effort.
A collective.
And the second people start stepping away and focusing on themselves, the individuals, over the ideals of the power they have as a group, they're diminishing their power. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about the character of V. He's a very interesting character.
I love him.
I love the way in which the film is a superhero movie without it being too heavy-handed a superhero movie. There's obviously lots of philosophy and lots of ideas, and the film has lots of things to say. But
it's based on a real.
It is. It's based on a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So V is sort of the reincarnation of the idea of Guy Fawkes. He's sort of picking up where Guy Fawkes left off 400 years later. And V doesn't see himself as an individual. He sees himself as a piece of the masses, or as the representation of this idea, which, like we've already discussed, is incredibly important. And I think one visual aspect of this is the mask he wears to hide his scars, but to also create a physical representation of the idea. And we see this at the end of the film where he gives the masks to everybody to wear so they can feel like they're a part of something and help live out the idea as well. And he himself becomes a symbol of the rebellion. But one quote in the film that I think causes us to question this is when Dietrich says, "You wear a mask for so long, you forget who you were beneath it." And of course, he's referring to the fact that he has to pretend to be a heterosexual when he's in fact not. Mm-hmm. And there's that sort of damage that you cause to a person. But I think this quote also occurs to V in that he wears a mask for so long. He spends so much time representing this idea that he forgets who he was beneath it. So do you think this happened to V, that he dedicated himself to this cause and he lost his identity almost? He's almost personally identityless?
Yes, absolutely. I think the fact that we never actually see V is on purpose, and I think that he is 100% just an idea. Mm-hmm. And the movie, the director does a great job of telling us that he's an idea who's told to us through the vehicle of a human. So by the body of a human, so that we can actually connect with this idea. Mm-hmm. Like the mask has very, very human-esque features to it, like cheekbones and eyes and lips, and it even has facial hair. Like it gives it a personality at least.
Right.
And I think the idea, you're right, the idea personifies the man. And the fact that he never takes off that mask lets us connect with the idea more than the man. And I think that they gave us a good backstory for V, showing that he was in this prison and that he was stripped of everything. Mm-hmm. They cut his hair, which is interesting, that what he wore had a huge lock of hair, which I thought was interesting. So maybe that was the only human part that he held on to, because they cut his hair. He was burned alive, so he's just disgusting everywhere. Mm-hmm. He was stripped of any normal human life at that point. So I think that he lost himself to the idea, both because he wore that mask for a long time to cover up what the government did to him, but I think that was something that he wanted, and I think that he fulfilled what he wanted to do with his life. And what he wanted to do with his life turned out to be that idea.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I guess the problem I kind of grapple with is how important is individuality in the face of some collective group effort? I don't know if I could personally do what V has done. Of course, he went through a lot of shit, and he was essentially created out of the things that happened to him in this lab, but to sacrifice your personal identity and manifest yourself as an idea, that's difficult to even conceptualize.
I think that you really have to go through what V went through to be able to fathom it, honestly.
You do. Okay, well, then let's take a step back. I mean, in a lot of regards, Evie goes through the same sort of change, just on a much smaller scale. Has she suffered any loss of individuality?
Yeah.
In the face of her cause? And is it worth it? Is that a necessary thing that needs to happen, just like the death of a few loved ones? Is that just like a cost of rebellion?
I think so, because she lost her boss. He was killed, and we assumed that he was killed. Yeah. So somebody that she loved was taken away from her.
Yeah.
V cut her hair, which I think brought her to. I think that it made her not who she was anymore.
And she also kept the haircut.
Yes.
She never let her hair grow back.
Yeah, because we commented on that multiple times when we were watching the movie. Like, why hasn't her hair grown back yet? And I think it was because I think Evie lost the majority of her individuality and became more of the idea in the end, but that was just because I think V was grooming her to be that. But I think in the end, when V went to die, when the idea went to die, she still expressed love towards the person. She completely said that she wanted to see the person under the mask, but V just would not let that happen. So I think that was a good portion of her, that she still withheld that part of her individuality. So I think that the idea was implanted in her, but she's still an individual. And I think that that was something that V did not understand. And I think that was part of his character arc, was that he might not be completely gone as a person, because there is still, you can harbor the idea while still being an individual. And I think that's something that he did not understand.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it was definitely a part of his flaw. And that I think he definitely felt that he couldn't connect with Evie. Not that he wasn't able to, but that he simply couldn't because of what had happened to him. And I think he thought that any sort of relationship with her beyond purely political, we'll call it, would have tainted what he was trying to do. And sure, you can make the argument that what he was trying to do, which, required a lot of planning and great understanding of a specific set of tasks, because, it's difficult to orchestrate the explosion of a government building. But I definitely think in the ways that V failed at maintaining his individuality while upholding the idea of something, Evie succeeded. And I think we hear it in her monologue when she talks about not missing the idea but missing the man. Because she clearly had an understanding of what V was representing. But she was beyond the idea at that point. She already accepted that. What she missed was V.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty profound.
Absolutely.
V also talks about the way ideas are sort of bulletproof. During the final fight scene with Mr. Creedy, he says, beneath this mask, there's more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there's an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. And I think the film demonstrates this theme time and time again. We see the power of ideas very often in the way in which people represent them. But if we extrapolate this theme a little larger and apply it to characters other than V, I think we begin to see a potential flaw or hypocrisy in it. Because while V may represent an idea as an individual, he represents ideals of freedom and justice and morality and fairness and things of that nature. On the other side of the spectrum, I think one could argue that Sutler represents an idea as well. And that even though V feels the need to kill Sutler to bring about this anarchy, this destruction of the government, I think it's at least arguable that the Chancellor is also more than a man, and that he represents the ideals of power and greed and fascism, dictatorship. So does his death actually signify the end of anything? The end of an idea?
No, because killing him didn't mean anything. He said it himself that that was just like his revenge or something, just his personal vendetta. And same with what Evie did. Evie sending that train to Parliament, that's not going to do anything. But it's the guy who was preaching the idea to everybody, Sutler, when he wasn't there, and at the end of it, all the soldiers were asking, what do we do now? And no response. They're like, we haven't heard anything. We haven't heard anything. So then the people just started walking.
And the soldiers decided for themselves.
Correct.
Stand down.
So in a way, I don't think it's that hypocritical. There's elements of hypocrisy, but I think that there's also the good and bad.
But I mean,
these ideas were moral, and Sutler's were not.
But at the same time, we can also argue that once Sutler and Creedy had died, the military, then the people in the military, were then able to decide for themselves what was right and what was wrong.
Oh yeah, blowing up Parliament was a lot.
So, but I see your point, and I think it's expressed pretty well in the quote whenever V says, a building is a symbol, as is the act of destroying it. Symbols are given power by people, and alone a symbol is meaningless, but with enough people, blowing up a building can change the world.
Sure. And maybe that is to show the rest of the world that you can stand up.
Yeah.
So blowing up Parliament in a way is a sacrifice to England, but is just as powerful as V killing Sutler. But that is just something that the whole world's going to see.
So they're catalysts that just allow people to see their power visualized.
Yes. I was also thinking of something when I didn't realize this the first time I watched the movie. Second time around, I realized this. I'm thinking that none of that happened. Obviously, it was a movie, so none of it actually happened. But even within the movie's real world, I don't know if any of that actually happened because
they're in the Matrix.
yeah. I
didn't even think of that.
They're in the Matrix for sure.
And Hugo Weaving is the agent.
Yeah, and he's everywhere.
Shit.
And he is everywhere.
That's how he does
Holy
it.
fuck! Like that. That's actually a funny way to tie it all together.
What was your actual
theory
point before I derailed?
Do you remember how there's only 3 families that watch TV?
Yes.
Do you remember the little girl that got killed?
Yes.
So the little girl got killed, and then the gay late night talk show host, he was killed. And there's one other person I can't remember, but they were all present at the end. They were all there watching Parliament explode, or they're all there like with the soldiers like walking through them or something.
Yeah.
So I think that we saw them die. Like whenever somebody gets their head covered in that black thing, like they're dead. And whenever the girl gets shot in the head, she's dead, obviously. But then she was there at the end. So like what I'm thinking was, what if that whole end sequence didn't actually happen?
I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. I think the end sequence happened. They weren't there, but their presence showed to us. Yes, it was the idea that because they had fought for something, they were part of the idea, and they were there in spirit, we'll call it.
Okay, I can agree with that.
They were part of the rebellion.
I can agree with that. So me thinking that the events were not actually happening, it's actually them that weren't actually happening.
Right, it's just the other way around.
That works nicely.
Because we have no other proof that if the building didn't blow up, then what? The film makes a lot less sense.
You're right.
Unless they're in the Matrix.
Well, I'm just going to go with that one.
And
I love
at that point...
Yeah, dude, Hugo, just the amount of him, it just makes sense as agent.
So V seems to think he knows what's best for other people. I mean, besides carrying out this elaborate plot to destroy Parliament and kill the leader of this nation, we first see it when he decides to take Evie under his wing. Instead of leaving her in the building he uses to broadcast his message, he takes Evie back with him to his lair, wherever it is, and she has to stay with him for a while until she can escape. But when she discovers this, she's fairly upset, and she doesn't like that he decided something for her. Did V do the right thing there? It was an assumption he made that he knew what was best, and he was simply acting upon that. Because at that point, if he had left her, she was done. She was going to be taken by the government,
yes,
and tortured, imprisoned at best, and killed at worst.
Yes.
But was it V's decision to decide that was problematic for Evie? Because she had no say in the matter of whether or not she was taken under his wing.
I think he was all right to do that.
You do?
He was protecting the idea. Because if it wasn't for her, he would have been taken into custody or shot or killed right there. And if he would have left her, he would have let somebody who clearly made a snap decision, like a gut feeling decision, to stand up to a police officer for somebody who's, she might not have known it at the time, but is everything that she wanted to believe in and wanted to do. So I think that it was completely in the right that he did that.
I think I agree too, and I probably would have done the same thing. It makes me wonder what the bounds are of personal freedom and the choices we retain as individuals, and at what point we have to relinquish those for some greater idea, for morality. Because I mean, ultimately, all of V's decisions that he says are best for the people, he's making himself. He's saying, I think this is what's best, and then he acts upon it. And his whole rebellion against this tyrannical government is really it's him asserting his personal political views onto a mass of people. And fortunately, they agree with him, and he's able to mobilize them and cause that to work. But I don't know, is this any different than what the Chancellor is doing? That the Chancellor thinks he knows what's best for these people and acting for them and making decisions for them?
No, they're great. They're great opposites. They're perfect polar opposites. It just comes back down to the moral thing. V's making moral decisions in the favor of the people, and the Chancellor's making immoral decisions for money, because they showed that him and those.
What if the Chancellor thinks what he's doing is moral?
I understand that, but watching the movie, I know what I think is moral, and I know what I think is unmoral. And I know that killing people is immoral, so I don't agree with V doing that. But I mean, the idea, the thing that is pushing him towards what everything that he does is for a good idea.
I agree. I guess the point I'm making is the point you just solidified yourself, is that it's subjective, it's personal, and I don't think a universal code of morality exists.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Okay, what about later in the film when V not only kidnaps Evie again, but he leads her to believe that she's been imprisoned by the government,
Yeah, that's fucked up.
And he tortures her, and he breaks her. She was a person, and he breaks her.
No, that was fucked up. She had a panic attack when she got out.
Evie may have wanted her fear to be mitigated on some level.
Yeah,
right?
But that was not, I don't think that was V's decision to make.
So that's where you draw the line.
Because he kidnapped her when she was like free. She was out, you know, and he just posed as a guard and kidnapped her. It wasn't his call whatsoever to put her in a prison and torture her. That's messed up. It would have been different if she would have came back to him.
Right.
But I don't agree with that at all.
I don't know if I do, because at the same time, if V hadn't done that, I don't think Evie would have been mobilized by the cause.
I think that it was convenient that she was mobilized by the cause because of the torture.
So it was just a happy byproduct?
Well, yeah, I think so.
I think V knew that the way he was broken could be mirrored in Evie because of the similar qualities that they share. So not that he had it down to a science, like, oh, step 1, cut her hair, you know, step 2, give her a really cold shower, or whatever the fuck that was. But I think he at least had an understanding that if he could break Evie and rid her of her fear, he could immobilize her to fight for the cause and uphold the idea that he was representing once he would die.
Well, she was changed with 10 days left, and then all she did was push the button to let the train go.
It's still important.
You're right. It's just she didn't do a crazy amount.
But we have to also accept that the fight isn't over.
Sure.
Sutler and the rest of his minions might have been killed, but that's not the end of a rebellion.
True. That's fair. It's fair.
And I think someone has to lead it, and I think it's Evie. So I don't know. I don't know if I can see this as. I think this exists on a level different than simply dying for the cause. This is more than the greater good. This is more than the son dying at war, even though his mother's upset by it. This is the difference between is it okay to push someone in front of a moving train to save someone else?
Yeah, I've heard that moral question.
Like there's 2 people tied to a train track,
yes,
and you can save them both by pushing one person in front of the train.
Yes.
Do you do it? I don't know. Is that murder? Is that wrong?
Do you send a battalion of 12 guys to rescue one guy in the middle of a war? I don't know.
Maybe if his name's Private Ryan.
And one of the soldiers brings up a good question. Is this guy's life more important than 12 other guys' lives? And all Tom Hanks can say is, these are the orders. That's it. You just follow what you're told.
Yeah.
Those couple words, that's really weighted. And I think that it goes the same for what you just described from for Vendetta. It's huge. It's heavy.
It is, and I think we've been on the same page morally this entire conversation. Oh, yeah. And I don't think many people would disagree with what we're saying or think it outlandish, but I think we've reached the point where there are no clear answers, and morality becomes very gray, and it's much more personal than we'd hope it to be, which is upsetting. But and finally, to this point even further, V says violence can be used for good, and Evie's like, what you talk about? And V says justice. Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because the only person that I know in history that actually fought something without violence is Gandhi, and peaceful protests can only get you so far, especially when you're dealing with a government that is armed and has a history of violence and has people called fingermen, like the people that are willing to rape a woman who's out past the curfew. I think that's not just a slap on the wrist and this isn't fair. This is you have to kind of show a little bit of dominance, and you have to be able to fight for what's right. And what I'm assuming has been how many years, 20, 30 years of oppression, I think that it's not, I don't think it's deserving. I think it's just that violence comes into it.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. The problem I have is I don't think V actually understands what justice is, or that he's using it in the right terms. I think he thinks he's getting justice or achieving justice by killing the people who wronged him that were in that camp that caused him to become who he was. But I don't think that's justice. I think he's seeking retribution or personal vengeance upon them, which is actually kind of a hypocrisy, because he spends so much of his time spouting off about these ideas, yet he spends an equal amount of time, if not more time, enacting personal vengeance upon these people who wronged him. And I think it's very weird that that's the only aspect of his individuality that has remained, is his insatiable desire to kill these people who caused him to become who he is, What do you think about that?
V says, "What was done to me created me. It's a basic principle of the universe that every action will create an equal and opposing reaction." Evie responds, "Is that how you see it, like an equation?" V says, "What was done to me was monstrous." And what Evie said was, "And they created a monster." And the way that I see it is, what is a monster? It's like an animal.
Sure.
And animals know, like they know to eat, they know to kill, basic instincts. And I think that what V does is, although very thought out, he's also very instinctual. And I think that him killing is how he just sees, it's just a dog-eat-dog world in most cases. And I think that he thinks the killing is just because that's all those people have done to him. It's eye for an eye in his world. So I think that because of what happened to him when he was in that prison for something that he probably shouldn't have been imprisoned for, he thinks that it's just, you did it to me, I'm doing it to you. And I think that he knows that, and that's why he tried to push the idea so strongly upon Evie, is so that somebody can actually carry it out that wasn't as dehumanized and destroyed and, just beaten down as bad as he was.
But, I mean, that's still a bit hypocritical because he takes Evie and he still breaks her down. And
she doesn't get burned alive.
She doesn't go through the shit that he did, but he takes her, strips her of what she had that defined her, and made her something else.
She didn't go through exactly what he went through. And I think he put her through exactly what he knew she needed to go through.
So he gave her just enough?
That's what I think.
Are you also arguing that he's an entire product of what happened to him in the camp?
Yes.
So he couldn't have not killed all of these people?
Correct.
So it's not about justice then?
I think that
he can rationalize it that way, but it's not about justice.
I think it's the way he sees justice, though. Because you did this, you deserve this. So because you created me, I'm going to destroy you. That's what I think. That's how he views it.
That implies a choice, though. If we're saying that because something happened to him, they deserve a reaction, if you're deserving of something, that implies that there was a chance that what is happening to them could have not happened. So if they're deserving of punishment, it's almost as if they've earned it. Like, they did A, so they get B.
I think that's exactly how he sees it.
But like Evie says, though, is that how you view it? An equation. Justice is not an equation. Mm-hmm. That's vengeance. I think that's retribution.
Okay. But if that's how he thinks justice needs to be delivered.
I just find it extremely hypocritical that he spends the entire film spouting off these ideas about ideas and the power of ideas, and he's incredibly deft at mobilizing an entire population of people to fight for an idea, yet he focuses on one aspect of his individuality, the only aspect of himself that he retains from before he was V proper was what happened to create him and the way he makes that right in his own mind. And I disagree with the way he goes about doing it. I think it's kind of hypocritical. It's also the title of the film. It's V for Vendetta. Yeah. Like, do you know what a vendetta is? It's not... Vendettas are not formed to seek justice. They're formed to seek vengeance. Using blood and violence.
Somebody's got to get down and dirty.
And it's V.
Yeah, it's V. And who better to do that than somebody who's beaten down, dehumanized, and stripped of everything?
Sure. I mean, yeah, should or should not have done it is one issue. I guess the problem I have is that it's not really a problem. I think it's a declaration of his flaw. I think that's his, as a superhero, that's his flaw.
Yeah. He's a great character, though.
Oh, he is.
He's an awesome character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Why is V for Vendetta a movie you need to see before you die?
As far as all the movies that I've seen so far, it is by far my number one movie as far as showing the strength in people, and because you care about a character that you don't even get to see. And that was actually the most impressive, and it was an element that I took away from it immediately. It was V is nobody. Like, you don't know his character.
He's like a non-character.
And you love him, and you can connect with him, and you root for him. And everybody can relate to this movie because of the situation that it proposes. Because you can imagine the dystopian world, because it's not unlike ours. A little exaggerated.
Yeah.
But you live in a movie, so.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it's a political thriller in the truest sense of both of those words, in that it was marketed as this sort of action film, but it's so much deeper than that. It's not some skin deep superhero movie that just touts, the blood and the violence and the gore and the explosions, but there's lots of powerful ideas behind it, and it really makes you think about what your role as a citizen is in your government, and how you play a part as a part of the masses, and what that all means. It's crazy. Okay, everyone, that's it for this episode of Movies to Watch Before You Die. Thank you, Dan, for embarking on this very long discussion that didn't elicit many answers to things, but that's okay.
I would say it was a very victorious talk between the two of us, who are just kidding. I just wanted to do the V thing.
Very good friends. Yeah, he did it much better.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know enough V words.
No.
Oh well.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope the film has you all thinking about government and its role and your relationship to it and all that good stuff. Maybe just hold off on the terrorism rebellion stuff, though, because that could get a little sticky. And again, you can check out the links in the description to find out where you can rent or buy this film. Also, stay tuned for episode 7 of the podcast next Thursday, where we'll break down the film Into the Wild and discuss a ton of themes such as materialism, self-sufficiency, and individualism, to name a few. If you've not yet seen the film, definitely make sure to watch this one. This film is so important to see before you die. It is required viewing if you expect to call yourself a person. And even if you have seen it, watch it again, because it's so good. It's so good. And of course, there are links in the description for this film to see where you can rent or buy it today. And finally, if you would like to support Movies to Watch Before You Die, please consider signing up for a free trial of Amazon Prime via the affiliate link in the show notes. With Amazon Prime membership, you get unlimited free 2-day shipping, access to Kindle ebooks, and, most importantly, the ability to instantly watch thousands of movies and TV shows directly from Amazon's virtual library. You get all of those great things I just talked about free for 30 days, and for every new subscription Amazon gets, they toss $5 our way that goes directly towards making this podcast for you all every week. It's a win-win situation, so please look for the link in the description there and sign up today. And if you enjoyed the podcast this week, we would love to hear any reviews or comments via the platform you use to tune in. It really makes it all worth it for us. And if you'd like to stay up to date on all things related to Movies to Watch Before You Die, please be sure to join our mailing list via our website. That's markgazica.com. All right, boys and girls, that's all we have. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.